So, as you well know, I mentioned this last week, there is no card next week. So what we're doing instead is previewing a hypothetical super fight that so many people wanted that never happened, and that fight is Anderson Silva versus George St. Pierre. This is a fight that would have been probably the biggest selling UFC pay-per-view of all time if it happened. George St. Pierre, huge draw. Anderson Silva, pretty big draw. And so before we get into what this fight would be like, or what I think it would be like if it happened, we're going to talk about why it didn't happen. So if this fight were to happen in real life, it would have happened sometime after UFC 154, which was November 17th, 2002, where GSP unified his welterweight title with a win over interim champ Carlos Condit. So yeah, I'm just giving you guys a little bit of context here. And right after this, pretty decisive win by GSP over Carlos Condit. Speculation immediately begins about a super fight between the welterweight and middleweight champion. Obviously, Anderson Silva was the middleweight champion of the time, and GSP was the welterweight champion of the time. Both fighters were on ridiculous streaks. Silva was on a 16-fight UFC win streak and a 17-fight win streak overall. In that time, he was on just an absolute tear. He had 14 title defenses, plus an additional win where his opponent missed weight, 7 knockout of the night bonuses, 3 fight of the night bonuses, and 2 submission of the night bonuses. So just crazy. That's such a crazy streak. And 3 of his opponents did pop for steroids in the meantime, but Silva would obviously also pop 2 years later. But anyway, GSP was also on a 10-fight win streak, including 8 straight title fight wins, plus an interim win, amassing 3 fight of the night bonuses, 1 knockout, and 1 submission of the night bonus. So both guys were just so dominant in their weight classes. So this fight, again, there was speculation about it right away. Anderson Silva had fought on the last UFC pay-per-view, which was UFC 153, and started pushing for it immediately. He really wanted the fight. Dana admits the fight would be great to have in Dallas, Brazil, or especially Montreal. I think that would be the best option, which we'll talk about later. And even brought up Vegas as well, a little bit of payback. And some betting sites even put out some odds. Silva was the favorite at minus 185, and GSP was the slight underdog at minus 150. I found this a little bit surprising, but I think once we get into the technical aspects, I think that will become a little bit more clear. I was expecting the odds to be a little bit closer. So again, Silva was pushing for the fight with his UFC 153 knockout win. He fought Stephen Bonner there. Silva's camp was requesting the fight to be at 177 to 182 pounds. So again, this fight, both guys wanted it at a catchweight. Dana insisted, he repeatedly insisted this, that the fight would not be for a title. It would be, even if it wasn't at a catchweight, even if it was at 185 or 170, it would not be for a title. It would just be just a regular fight, which makes a little bit of sense because, well, it makes sense, because it's, if someone loses their belt, then it's, say, Silva loses to GSP, it's going to devalue his belt, because if he still has it, but he lost to a guy from the champion in a lower weight class, that's not very impressive. If Silva loses, then it's just diminished. It tarnishes his brand a little bit, because now he's got an extra loss on his record. This would be his 3rd loss. He'd avenged both his losses to Matt Serra and Matt Hughes by this point. Dana also says, interesting point here, that he doesn't think it would be reasonable for Silva to defend 2 belts simultaneously, assuming he went down to 170. And oh, how times have changed since then. And yeah, apparently 5 years ago, champions, or this was about 7 years ago, champions couldn't defend 2 belts at the same time, but now they can. A little bit strange. Anyway, you can guess why that changed. And the final reason I'll give for why this fight didn't happen is because of this man called Johnny Hendricks. Johnny Hendricks threw a big wrench in the works. He defeated, in the co-main event of UFC 154, which is the card where Silva won, where GSP beat Carlos Condit. Johnny Hendricks throws a big wrench in the works by defeating Martin Kampmann by round 1 knockout in just 40 seconds of the first round. Hendricks was the clear number 1 contender for the welterweight title. He was on a 5-fight win streak with 3 knockout of the night bonuses. All those were first-round knockouts in the same stretch. This included a 12-second knockout over John Fitch and a decision over Josh Koscheck. So both guys who had fought GSP, both guys who were at the top of the division in tough competition, he just starched them. And he would later go on to reinforce his case for immediate title shot with a win over Carlos Condit 5 months later at UFC 158. And this was not a very close fight. This was another fight of the night bonus. So this is his 4th post-fight bonus in 6 fights. The clear number 1 contender. So as you can see, they were waiting. GSP never really committed to the title fight. His camp, Firas Zahabi, did point out that Silva has fought at 168 pounds before, so he should drop down. And also the precedent is a little bit that in boxing, for example, if the 2 guys are fighting from different weight classes, it's on the bigger guy to cut more weight, which again I think is fair. GSP cited the size difference a lot, though I do think that is a little bit overstated, but either way. So let's get into, if this fight did happen, what are some stylistic components that might play a factor in here. So we'll start with the stances. So Silva is a little bit, he prefers to fight in southpaw, which should help with defending takedowns. Silva does not have the best takedown defense, which will be a huge factor. This is, again, especially against someone with a good double leg. So you saw that in both Chael Sonnen fights, really. Chael Sonnen was really one of the worst case matchups. And then you had someone like Chris Weidman, who didn't get a double leg on Silva, but the threat is always there. Silva relies a ton on his footwork, but if you can catch him square and you get the takedown, then he gets very complacent off his back, sort of old school jiu-jitsu guard, where you just kind of look for submissions, which don't really work as well in MMA. And GSP also has very good submission defense. He hadn't been submitted in his career aside from the armbar that Matt Hughes got on him in the first fight, which was kind of a fluke. GSP has stated that he's worked on it a lot since then. That wouldn't happen again. So that's Silva, bad takedown defense, but he is southpaw, so their hips won't be aligned, which makes it a little bit easier in defending takedowns. So as far as wrestling, advantage, definitely GSP. So our next point is GSP also has a tendency to put a lot of weight behind his jab, and he reaches with his jab a lot. So he'll go in a square stance, and then when he jabs, he'll often go into a more bladed stance, so he'll put his lead foot forward. What that means is he's not able to shift his weight around as easily, and also means kind of negates his right hand because his stance is so bladed, and he'll have to reach so far to land his right hand. Again, GSP is an orthodox fighter. So we're talking left jab, and then he would have to have a long right straight in order to land it. Again, most of GSP's game is jab and feint jab takedown or jab takedown. He'll alternate between a body jab and a jab to the head. The jab, Silva has been prone to body shots, so the jab could be interesting there. However, Silva is also very good at landing body shots, and GSP has shown himself to be prone to body kicks, so that kind of negates itself. But if Silva is able to time the jab, where GSP is a little bit out of position, where he's reaching, where he's putting a lot of weight on his front foot, and isn't able to shift around as quickly, if Silva can time that, that'll be a huge advantage, because Silva's just there out in the open. So Silva, overall, just has the far better striking arsenal, though the threat of the takedown could potentially minimize his kicks. I still think he would throw them once he got comfortable. If he can get the timing of the body kick down, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, that would be huge, especially because they are in open stances. Again, GSP usually orthodox, Silva mostly southpaw. That means the body kick is there, and I think that would be an important thing for Silva. But again, he can't fall in love with it because GSP can get the takedown off of it. Our next point is both fighters are fairly strong in the clinch, but I think you have to give the advantage to Silva. He's a lot more active in the clinch. GSP is more of a fighter who will strike to set up a takedown, whereas Silva just wants to hit you with those brutal knees and elbows, which won him the title against Rich Franklin, I believe. And GSP, again, has to be aware of the knees. Silva's also good at landing strikes and controlling the distance as they break. That's always so dangerous against Anderson Silva. And Silva is very confident in his distance control and footwork. He relies on that a lot for his defense instead of a traditional high guard, similar to Stephen Thompson, someone like that, where their hands are almost at their hips, and they rely a lot on upper body movement and footwork to keep them out of range. And the flip side of the coin is this can put them into dangerous situations if they misread the situation. And as we would later come to find out in a fight that hasn't happened yet, which is Chris Weidman 1, which hasn't happened yet, GSP can catch him if Silva gets overconfident and he's in range when he thinks he's out of range, because then he's not moving his head as much and he can get caught clean again in the fight that hasn't happened yet, where that would happen. And as far as who's leading the dance, as far as who's pressuring, I would expect Silva to lead for the first few minutes of the fight to try and get GSP uncomfortable and really establish the distance, because he tends to do that. He tends to come out very aggressive, and then he tends to relax a little bit, get into his counter-striking flow, because he does prefer to counter-strike, and GSP does prefer to lead a little bit. So I think after the first few minutes, if it calms down, then the fight will start to shift where GSP is advancing and Silva is looking to counter off of it, and then GSP can duck under the counters and get the takedown. I think that's how it would start to shape up. And another thing is, I think that if Anderson Silva did get taken down, and I think he would get taken down if the fight wasn't just like a fluke one-round knockout. Not necessarily a fluke. Silva has shown it's not a fluke, but I think that would be unlikely that it's a round one knockout win for either guy. But if Silva gets taken down and he gets back up and there's, say, 30 seconds left, he'll do this thing where he'll be super aggressive and throw a ton of feints, ton of looks, and just be super aggressive for the last minute of the fight to try and kind of win the round back on the judges' scorecards. I think that would definitely happen if he went down. So let's get into how I think this fight would go. So, here we go. Again, Silva, 17-fight win streak, 16 UFC wins, 14 straight title defenses. GSP, 10-fight win streak, 8 straight title defenses. Both guys, the biggest, most dominant fighters in the sport, two of the biggest draws in the sport. And here we go. Let's get into the details. So, the date is March 16th, 2013. We're in Montreal, Quebec, Canada at UFC 158. Just a few other fights on the card. You have a young TJ Dillashaw knocking out Isaiah Tamura. Rick Story getting a first-round knockout over late-notice replacement Quinn Mulhern. Darren Elkins defeats Antonio Carvalho. Blah, blah, blah. And on the undercard, you have Johnny Hendricks defeating Carlos Condit by unanimous decision. And, of course, we have our main event, Anderson Silva versus George St. Pierre, at a catchweight at 175 pounds. While Silva wanted the fight to be closer to his preferred weight class, obviously, St. Pierre cites the unfair weight advantage as a reason. So, here's Bruce Buffer with the announcements. So, we get into the fight, round one. They exchange a few jabs, there's a lot of feints. Neither fighter really wants to commit a lot. GSP does get a nice double leg takedown off a Silva jab and gets him to the ground and secures it. Silva does a very nice job of controlling the posture, however. GSP isn't able to land a lot, but does manage to pass to half guard, lands a little bit of ground and pound in the last few seconds as Silva tries to create some space and stand up. So the first round goes to GSP, 10-9. Round two. They exchange long-range shots in the open. Silva starts to find his range a little bit and land a few leg kicks. GSP shoots, but it gets stuffed, and they go against the cage in the clinch. Silva reverses the position and lands some good knees in the clinch. GSP tries to break and narrowly misses an elbow on the break. Silva lands a few more straight punches until GSP ducks under and lands another takedown to finish out the round. That round goes to Silva, 10-9. GSP feints the takedown in round 3 and lands a big right hand over the top. Silva clinches and holds it to recover. He begins to land some nice elbows as he gets his wits about him back and starts to land more straight punches as they separate. And GSP's head movement is beginning to slow down. GSP shoots another takedown to relieve the pressure, but it's stuffed, and Silva lands some more clinch strikes. So this round goes 10-9 Silva. Round 4, Silva opens up with a body kick that lands hard. GSP tries his jab, but Silva counters it as he starts getting his timing and distance down even further. He lands the body kick a few more times, but goes to the well a few many times, and Silva catches one and takes him down. He manages to pass the half guard, but doesn't land as much ground and pound. This round 10-9 GSP. And then our 5th and final round, Silva starts taunting and running around the ring, popping GSP with his jab and landing some hard leg kicks. GSP stays calm behind his jab and lands some nice shots in return. Both fighters seem to have slowed considerably. Silva with a little bit less movement, GSP with a little bit less head movement, which is making Silva a little bit more accurate and snapping GSP's head back. GSP tries another takedown to secure the fight, but Silva gets them to the clinch and cuts GSP hard with a nice hard elbow. They separate and Silva continues to taunt, dancing around the ring, landing more straight punches, but GSP is able to avoid most of the powerful shots. GSP tries to secure a takedown at the end of the fight, but Silva avoids it with his footwork, and the final round goes 10-9 Silva. So I think a fight between these guys would be 2 judges scoring at 48-47 Silva and 1 49-46 towards Silva. So, an overall impression of the fight, if I were to review it, I think that GSP's threat of the takedown helped minimize a lot of the kicks that Silva likes to throw, but ultimately the timing and the distance control by Silva would win the fight, and I think he's also very good at controlling people's posture when he does get taken down, so GSP would maybe get takedowns, but wouldn't necessarily be able to get a lot off of them. But yeah, this fight, I really wish it would have happened, and I really don't think there would be a finish. I think both guys are durable enough to stay in the fight. I do think GSP would slow down a little bit with the body kicks and with going for takedowns but getting them stuffed. Silva would slow down just because he would constantly have to defend the takedown, and he would have to rely a lot on movement because, again, the kicks wouldn't be there. But yeah, ultimately, I think I agree with the odds. At first, I didn't agree. I thought the odds should have been a lot closer, but the more I did stylistic research, I think that Silva, we didn't talk too much about the size difference, but that would be a factor in defending the takedowns. He would be stronger. Silva in the cage is probably about 205. GSP is about 195, so 10 pounds weight difference is not super substantial, especially as you increase in weights. But the size obviously helps quite significantly. But yeah, ultimately, I think Silva does get the win. I think it's a close fight. I think it's entertaining. I think both guys get to show a little bit of their advantage, but ultimately, I think Silva does get the victory by decision. So yeah, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. We're going to do something a little bit similar to this next week, again, because there is no card next weekend. We're not even going to be able to review a card, so it'll probably be a little bit of a slower show. Again, I'm not super sure what I'm going to do yet, but we'll figure it out. And let me know what you guys thought of this. Let me know if you guys want to see more preview to the fight, more detailed analysis of what the fight might have been, more detailed history, more context to the fight, or more commentary on how I think the fight would go. And yeah, I think that's going to do it, guys. I'll see you next Thursday. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope this helped quench your thirst for MMA content, because there really is not a lot going on in the next few weeks. We just got to hold out for UFC 245. That is a great card. We got 3 title fights to preview, and I'm going to start working on that now because that is, like I said, a great card. We got 2 great UFC events, and yeah, I will see you guys soon. Have a great day, and peace out.